"You don't belong here," she said, loud, clear, designed to carry across the marble lobby and out onto the manicured lawn where everyone could hear. "This club has standards, and you, sir, do not meet them." He didn't flinch. He stood there in his pressed polo shirt, his golf bag resting against his shoulder, his eyes steady and calm in the way that only certain kinds of people can manage, the kind who have been through fire and come out the other side still standing. He looked at her the way a mountain looks at wind. Nobody in that lobby moved. The receptionist behind the desk stared at her screen. Two members in linen blazers found sudden interest in their shoes. A teenage caddy near the door turned away. Nobody said a word. Nobody offered a hand. Nobody did anything. And then the woman, the club manager, her name badge reading Patricia, though she went by Pat to everyone who mattered, pointed at the door. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He didn't know it then, but Patricia Whitmore had just made the most expensive mistake of her career. In less than 90 minutes, she would be the one walking out that door, and she would never walk back in. Have you ever been told you don't belong somewhere? Have you ever felt the specific sting of being dismissed before you even opened your mouth? Stay with this story, because what happened next at Fairview Country Club on the morning of April 14th is something that will stay with you for a long time. Let me take you back. 6 hours earlier, Marcus Webb woke up at 5:47 in the morning, the way he had every morning for 31 years. Not an alarm, his body simply knew. He lay in bed for exactly 2 minutes, staring at the ceiling of his modest apartment in the Eastgate district, the same apartment he had lived in since his divorce. The walls were bare except for one photograph, his father James Webb standing on a golf course in 1987, squinting into the sun, holding a 7-iron like it was something sacred. Marcus was 53 years old. He had large, careful hands that had spent decades doing precise, patient work. He made his coffee the same way every morning, 2 scoops, no sugar, and he drank it standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down felt like giving the day permission to go slow. He ironed his polo shirt the way his mother had taught him, smooth and flat, collar perfect, the way you dress when the world is watching, even when you think it isn't. He had one ritual before every round of golf. He opened the drawer beside his bed and took out his father's glove. Old brown leather, the initials JW stitched into the wrist in faded gold thread. The fingers were worn soft from years of use, the palm darkened with the memory of 10,000 swings. Marcus didn't wear it. He never wore it. He simply held it for a moment, the way you hold something that used to belong to someone you loved, and then he set it gently on top of his bag. James Webb had taught Marcus golf on a municipal course with broken tees and a pro shop run from a converted trailer. He had taught him the game the way only certain men can teach, not with technique alone but with meaning. He said golf was honesty. He said you couldn't cheat the ball. He said every swing was a conversation between who you were and who you wanted to be. He died of a heart attack in 2009, still waiting to play Fairview Country Club, the place where the greens were so famous you could hear people describe them from 3 states away. He never got the invitation. Marcus had always kept that fact somewhere quiet and heavy in his chest. He had never been to Fairview either, not until today. The drive took 40 minutes. Marcus arrived at 7:15, parking in the guest lot, checking his bag, walking toward the main entrance with the same measured pace he brought to everything. The building was exactly what it promised to be. Grand white columns, a circular driveway, a fountain that ran even in April, flowering hedges trimmed to military precision. The kind of place that spent considerable money looking effortless. The lobby was cool and smelled of leather and flowers. A young woman at the front desk looked up briefly, then back down. Marcus approached the counter and gave his name. He had a tea time. He had made it 3 weeks ago, over the phone, and confirmed it in writing. He had the confirmation email on his phone. Patricia Whitmore appeared from an office doorway behind the desk. She was perhaps 45, carrying herself with the specific confidence of someone who had run a small kingdom for a very long time. She was dressed impeccably. Ivory blouse, dark blazer, the kind of shoes that clicked with authority on marble floors. She looked at Marcus the way someone looks at an item delivered to the wrong address. She didn't check the reservation. She didn't ask for his name. She looked at him, at his face, at his bag, at his worn leather glove resting on top of it, and she made her decision in under 3 seconds. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Are you here for the maintenance crew?" Marcus said politely that he had a tea time. He stated his name. He mentioned the confirmation. She smiled the way people smile when they have decided not to listen. "I think there may be some confusion. This is a private club." He said he understood. He was a guest. He had a reservation, and that was when she said it, louder than necessary, stepping out from behind the counter, positioning herself between him and the hallway that led to the course. "You don't belong here. This club has standards, and you, sir, do not meet them." The lobby went still. She pointed at the door. She asked him to leave. She said it with the ease of someone who had done it before, someone who had learned that confidence and certainty can substitute for authority if you project them forcefully enough. In 15 years of managing Fairview Country Club, Patricia Whitmore had never once been wrong in a way that had consequences. She had cultivated a specific talent for dismissal, but here is what she did not know. She did not know about the manila folder sitting in a black briefcase in the trunk of Marcus Webb's car, a folder she would hear about soon enough. She did not know that Marcus had driven 40 minutes that morning, not just to play a round of golf, but to visit the course his father had always dreamed of before a deal was finalized. And she did not know, could not have known, because she hadn't looked, hadn't asked, hadn't done the basic courtesy of treating him like a person worth knowing, that Marcus Webb was the sole signatory on a purchase agreement worth $80 million. She would know. In 87 minutes she would know everything. For now she just pointed at the door, and Marcus Webb, calm as a man who has learned to let the world show its hand before he shows his, picked up his bag. He reached into the side pocket. He took out his phone. He placed one call. 3 words, spoken quietly, so quietly that Patricia had to strain to hear them from across the lobby. He said, "Come inside now." Then he looked at her. "I'll wait," he said. He sat down in one of the lobby chairs, the good ones near the window, with the view of the 18th green. He set his bag beside him. He rested his father's glove on his knee, and he waited. Patricia Whitmore watched him sit down with an expression that moved from irritation to uncertainty to something that might have been the first dim warning of a very large mistake. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She clicked back to her office on those expensive shoes and decided privately that security would handle it. She did not call security right away. She would think about that later. Let me tell you about the glove, because the glove matters. James Webb had bought it in 1988 at a pro shop in Augusta. Not the Augusta, just a city with the same name, a different state, a different world. It cost him $11, which was more than he could really afford. He was 29 years old and working 2 jobs and learning golf on stolen hours, early mornings and late evenings when the municipal course let working men play for half price. He was not a natural. He was something better, a man who loved something deeply enough to be bad at it for a long time and keep going. He stitched his initials into the glove himself. JW in gold thread, because gold was his favorite color and because he told Marcus once, "You should mark your things like they matter, like you matter." He got good eventually, not professional good, life good. He could read a green the way some men read faces, intuitive and patient and rarely wrong. He could hit a 7-iron in a crosswind and make it do things that made other players stop and watch. He played in local tournaments on weekends and occasionally won, and when he won, he kept the trophies in a row on the windowsill of the kitchen and never said much about them. What he talked about was Fairview. He had a photograph of it torn from a magazine kept in the same drawer as his glove. The greens, he said, were like nothing anywhere. The whole course was like a poem someone had written with grass and water and light. He wanted more than almost anything to play there once before he died. He never did. When Marcus cleaned out his father's apartment in October of 2009, he found the magazine photograph still in the drawer, worn soft along the fold lines. He took it. He took the glove. He put them both somewhere close, the way you keep the things that ache. He became a civil engineer, then a contractor, then a developer. Slowly, quietly, brick by brick, project by project, over 3 decades of work that most people in the world of private golf clubs and marble lobbies would never have thought to look for in a man like him. He built affordable housing, then he built commercial properties, then he built something significant enough that a private equity group from Atlanta noticed him and they started talking, and the talking turned into something real. Fairview Country Club had been struggling, the membership base was aging, the maintenance costs were extraordinary, the board had been quietly desperate for 2 years and they had finally decided to accept a sale. The buyer, a development group planning to preserve the course while expanding the adjacent property, had a lead investor. His name was Marcus Webb. The $80 million purchase agreement had been signed in principle the previous Thursday. The closing documents were in the briefcase in his trunk. He had come early, before the lawyers arrived, to walk the course his father had wanted to see. That was all he had wanted. One quiet morning, his father's glove on his bag, the famous greens under his feet before they became, in some technical sense, partly his. But here is what happens sometimes in this world. Sometimes the people who hold the door decide who gets through before they know who's knocking. Sometimes authority gets performed so loudly it can't hear itself being wrong. and sometimes the 87th minute arrives, and everything shifts, and no amount of ivory blazers and clicking heels can put it back. Marcus was still sitting in the lobby chair when the door opened. There were 4 of them. Thomas Ellison, the senior partner from the Atlanta Equity Group, Diane Marsh, the club's own board chairwoman, a notary, and a man Marcus hadn't met before, Harold Greer, the club's founding member, 81 years old, using a cane and wearing an expression of complete bewilderment at what he was seeing. They stopped. They looked at Marcus sitting in the lobby with his golf bag and his father's glove on his knee. They looked at Patricia Whitmore, who had just emerged from her office to supervise what she'd expected would be a quiet removal. They stood in the doorway for a moment that lasted a very long time. Thomas Ellison said, "Marcus, why are you sitting out here?" Patricia Whitmore's face did something complicated. Color drained from it the way water drains from a glass, not all at once, but steadily, unmistakably, until what was left was the particular pallor of someone realizing the size of what they have done. Diane Marsh, board chairwoman, looked at Patricia with an expression that was not quite fury but was the quiet precursor to it. "Patricia," she said, "would you like to explain what's happening?" Patricia Whitmore opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at Marcus, who had stood up from his chair without hurry, who had picked up his bag and his father's glove, who looked back at her with eyes that were utterly, completely, devastatingly calm. "Mr. Webb was just on his way out," Patricia said, and the moment the words left her mouth she seemed to understand that they were the last words she would ever say in this building with any authority. Harold Greer, the 81-year-old founder, walked past her without looking at her. He extended his hand to Marcus. "Son," he said, "I'm so sorry. Please come in. This course has been waiting for someone like you for a very long time." Marcus shook his hand. He didn't say anything about Patricia. He didn't need to. They walked through the lobby, past the reception desk, past the 2 men in linen blazers who had found their shoes so interesting an hour ago, both of whom were now watching with expressions of deep, private shame, and out onto the hallway that led toward the most famous greens in the region. Behind them, Diane Marsh stayed behind, and the conversation she had with Patricia Whitmore lasted 11 minutes. What happened next happened fast. These things always do once the gravity shifts. Diane Marsh placed a call to the club's legal counsel within the hour. The grounds were clear. Discriminatory denial of access to a contracted party in a public accommodation witnessed by multiple members and staff. Patricia Whitmore was placed on administrative leave before noon. By 3 o'clock, she had been formally terminated, the board having convened an emergency session in the dining room while Marcus walked the back 9 with Harold Greer, who turned out to know more about every hole than the course architect who designed them. The receptionist who had looked at her screen, her name was Keisha, and she had worked there 2 years and had seen 3 things like this happen before and never said a word, came forward that afternoon. She gave a written account. She named dates. She named incidents. She named other members who had been treated this way by Patricia Whitmore over the course of her tenure, most of them never having complained because they had believed correctly that no one would listen, until now. The story reached the local news that evening. By the next morning, it had spread. The phrase Patricia had used, "You don't belong here," became the headline on 17 different news outlets within 24 hours. The phrase was exactly the kind of phrase that the internet knows how to carry. Short, specific, and permanently damning in retrospect. Patricia Whitmore's name trended for 2 days. Her professional history was examined. 3 former employees came forward with accounts of a pattern that stretched back years, a quiet, consistent policy of judgment at the door that had nothing to do with reservations and everything to do with who looked like they belonged. The club's legal exposure was significant. Fairview's attorneys began settlement conversations almost immediately. A civil rights attorney in Atlanta watching the story develop called Marcus's office on Thursday morning. He did not have to explain why he was calling. Marcus had already been thinking about it. The lawsuit that followed named Patricia Whitmore individually and Fairview Country Club institutionally. It cited documented incidents across a period of 6 years, gathered from the accounts of 14 individuals who had been turned away, humiliated, or denied services on grounds that a jury would have no difficulty understanding. The settlement, reached 7 weeks later, was not disclosed in full, but the terms included a mandatory review of all club policies, the installation of an independent oversight committee with diverse membership, a training requirement for all club staff, and a financial award that went, per Marcus's specific instruction, entirely to a fund he had already decided to create. He called it the James Webb Memorial Golf Scholarship. It was announced at the closing ceremony for the sale of Fairview Country Club on a Tuesday morning in June, 6 weeks after the morning Marcus had sat in the lobby with his father's glove on his knee. The press was there. Several board members were there. Harold Greer was there, still with his cane, smiling with the specific satisfaction of a man who has lived long enough to see things come right. Marcus stood at a small podium and spoke for less than 10 minutes. He said that his father had wanted to play this course for 40 years. He said that his father had been a man of patience and dignity and a beautiful golf swing that Marcus had inherited only partially. He said that the course was going to remain a course. The greens weren't going anywhere. The back nine wasn't going anywhere. And that beginning the following spring, 10 young golfers from the Eastgate Municipal Program, where James Webb had first picked up a club, would play Fairview every year on scholarship, free of charge, with full access to every facility. He held up the glove at the end, just held it up, didn't say anything about it. Anyone who needed to understand understood. The scholarship named its first cohort that fall, 10 kids from 3 municipal programs, ages 12 to 17. The youngest was a girl named Dana, who could already outdrive most adults she played with, and who had never been on a private course in her life. She shot a 78 on her first round at Fairview. She wept at the 18th green quietly, the way you weep when something you wanted with your whole heart finally becomes real. Marcus watched her from the gallery. He didn't say anything. He had his father's glove in his jacket pocket, the way he kept it now, close and warm, the gold initials pressed against his side. Patricia Whitmore did not attend the ceremony. She had, according to her LinkedIn profile, pivoted to hospitality consulting. Her references from Fairview were not available. Here's what really gets me about this story. It isn't the $80 million. It isn't the lawsuit or the settlement or the trending hashtag or the formal termination delivered in 11 minutes by a board chairwoman who had finally run out of patience. What gets me is the glove. The old brown leather glove with the gold initials that a man stitched himself in 1988 because he believed his things should be marked like they matter, like he mattered. James Webb never walked Fairview's greens. He held a magazine photograph of them until the fold lines went soft. He taught his son that golf was honesty, that you couldn't cheat the ball, that every swing was a conversation, and his son carried that conversation for 30 years. Through the civil engineering and the contracting and the long, quiet work of building something real. He carried it all the way to a marble lobby where a woman in an ivory blazer looked at him and decided in 3 seconds who he was. And he sat down in the best chair by the window, with the view of the 18th green, and he waited, because he knew something she didn't. He always had. His father would have loved those greens. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of something or someone, share it. Like it. Let it reach someone who needs to hear it. And tell me, have you ever been the person sitting in that chair waiting for the world to catch up to what you already knew about yourself? Leave that in the comments. I want to hear it. And one more thing. What gets me, what I keep coming back to, is the specific cruelty of being dismissed before you've said a word. Patricia Whitmore never asked Marcus his name. She never checked the reservation. She looked, and she decided. That is the mechanism of so much harm in this world. The decision made before the conversation. The judgment rendered before the evidence. But Marcus Webb walked out onto those greens. He played the course his father dreamed of. He played it slowly with a father's glove on his knee, on a Tuesday morning in June when the light was exactly right and the famous greens were every bit as beautiful as a torn magazine photograph had promised. So here is my question, and I want you to think about it seriously before you answer. If you had been in that lobby, one of those people in linen blazers who found your shoes so interesting, what would you have done? Would you have spoken? Would you have said something? Or would you have looked away too? There's no wrong answer. But there is an honest one, and I think you know which one it is.